All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Corey Hill from the Partnership for People with Disabilities at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I want to welcome you to our June Talks on Tuesday. This is part 2 of using eco maps to understand family relationships. We did part 1 in May. It is archived and on our website. You also should have gotten that recording link in your connection information email for today. So if you happen to miss part 1, you can catch up. We are going to go ahead and get started. I am delighted to welcome our 2 presenters. Jessica Hale is going to be taking the lead this time. And Naomi Grinney is going to be kind of in the background, but we'll be jumping in. Naomi took the lead on the May session, but we are very happy to have them share their expertise. And Jess, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. So I am Jessica Hale. Some of you might remember me if you were on our May Talk on Tuesday. I introduced myself in the beginning and then disappeared completely. I am a service coordinator supervisor in the city of Virginia Beach with the infant program. And prior to stepping into this role, I actually was a developmental service provider for a few years. So hopefully today we can give you a nice perspective of how you might engage with eco maps, both as a service coordinator and as a provider. And I'll turn it over to Naomi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Naomi Grinney. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and infant mental health specialist with the Infant and Toddler Connection in Fairfax. And I'm so excited to have you all here and just really looking forward to being able to share this second part of Talks on Tuesdays with you.
All right, thanks, Naomi. So it has been about a month since we did part 1. So we're just going to take a minute to kind of jog your memory and recap what we talked about back in May. So if you weren't with us and you do want to look at the archive for the full presentation, then we encourage you to do so. But kind of in brief, what we talked about last Talk on Tuesday was family systems theory. So Naomi shared a ton of great information about family systems theory and considering not just the child in our practice, but considering also the whole family system at play and the family that surrounds them. And you guys provided great feedback in May about how this is really central to early intervention practice, and we really get at our best practice when we consider the family at large and not just one individual within it. Naomi kind of extended that even further to look at ecological systems and suggested that not only should we be cognizant of family systems theory and family structures, but also the whole ecological system that surrounds that child and his family. So looking also at the system of care, that family's chosen community, and then the community at large, and how all of those things impact our child here at the center, and how that child and its family in turn impact all of the things around it. And Naomi wrapped up our part 1 by introducing eco maps, which we know were pioneered by Ann Hartman. And she kind of touched on the fact that eco maps are a really great visual tool that can help us represent these concepts of family systems theory and ecological systems, how we can look at a family in the center and have a visual representation of all of the things that surround that family. And so we find that really by looking at it this way, we can help families better understand their own systems, and that the relationships that they have around them are really a very large part of their journey. So today we are going to go into more of a practice-based application of eco maps. So we're going to start by talking more in depth about eco mapping and how we can fully complete an eco map exercise. So part 1 was kind of an introduction. Today we are really going to kind of hunker down and get into it. We're also going to talk about eco maps in early intervention practice. So we're going to discuss kind of the practical use of eco-maps in early intervention. And then we're going to wrap up today by talking about eco-maps as a tool. So we know that early interventionists right now are feeling a lot of pressure with rising caseloads and new health records and lots of new things. So our goal today is to show you how eco-maps can really integrate into the practice that you're already engaged in, and not add an extra step, but really just take everything you're doing and make it more streamlined and easier. So hopefully all of these things will be clear to you today. So we are going to revisit Cassie's story from May. If you guys could go ahead and get that out and get it handy, so that when we touch on it again, it's familiar to you again. Seth went ahead and dropped it in the chat. You can find it there. It was also included in the email that you received this morning. You might have printed a hard copy, so just kind of have it out in front of you. We will be referring to it. And we're going to just do a quick summary to refresh your memories from May. So we talked about how Cassie is a 12-month-old little girl. She lives at home with both parents and an older brother. And we learned that she goes to church every week. She goes to school where she has some friends that range in age. She has 3 teachers. She sees a cardiologist. And we also touched on her relationship with both her maternal and paternal grandparents and learned that the family has a strained relationship with the maternal grandparents, but they do have an ongoing relationship with the paternal grandparents. And despite them living far away, they do engage in FaceTime calls every week to kind of keep in touch. Some of the developmental information that we learned about Cassie is that mom expressed that she's feeling a little concerned about selective eye contact. She noted that Cassie is easily panicked when people approach her. So if they're unfamiliar people, she gets pretty panicked. She can be very difficult to engage. And mom said that's even with people she's familiar with. But she is playing really well independently. She loves looking at books. She loves doing puzzles and playing in her toy kitchen. And while she's doing those things, she is making a few sounds. So they aren't varied. And mom doesn't know that they're age appropriate, but she is using a few sounds while she's engaging with others. So here we kind of talk about all of this information about what the family does kind of in their daily and weekly routines. We discussed mom's concerns and also medical associations and kind of the medical history at play. So this should sound familiar to you guys who practice in early intervention. Can you write in the chat for me, where do we typically collect this type of information? So learning the medical background, looking at the routines that families engage in, and collecting information about the family concerns. As early interventionists, where are you typically collecting this type of information in your practice? Right, so Corey and Lisa have shared the intake, Donna absolutely, and Debbie. So all of you kind of noted that initial intake is exactly where you're gathering that information. And that's exactly correct. So we know in early intervention, we are going to continue to gather that information as a part of our ongoing assessment as we continue to go out to homes for reviews and annuals and provider sessions. But absolutely, yeah, Naomi, our first visit is a provider, where we are very first asking families these information really tends to be at that intake. And you guys noted last month that we collect a lot of information through observation. Maybe that very first phone call, we're noticing some of the noises in the background when we walk up to the front door to knock. We're already taking in a lot of information. But our IFSP page 2 is really the first time that we are documenting the information that we collect here. Absolutely. So we start to learn about the family right here in the beginning. So we consider our initial conversations with families. Here our focus is on health, concerns, daily activities, and here at the very end, their priorities and their resources. So these are things that our practitioners are focused on from the start. It's some of the first things that we ask. And we've all had families who are very open to sharing at these first visits. So we are asking them very specific, very personal questions, and they are so ready to give us a wealth of valuable and rich information about their child and their family. And that, of course, is our ideal and perfect world, is when we can really get to know them right from the start. But as you all, I'm sure, have experienced, these conversations can actually be really difficult as well. So sometimes families aren't really ready to share all of that information with us. So in the chat, can we just share with each other, what are some challenges that you have experienced when you're trying to gather this information in the beginning? And you're really trying to learn about their concerns and their network. What are some challenges that you guys are facing? Yes, absolutely, Lauren. That is a very big challenge, is when you say, okay, we're here today to talk about Cassie. Tell me a little bit about your concerns. And they say, well, I don't have any concerns. And so that can put kind of a halt to this much larger conversation that we hope to be having. Absolutely. Debbie, yes. So I have no concerns, or maybe I'm downplaying the concerns. I'm saying, well, the pediatrician said something about a speech delay, but I'm really not worried about that. I don't think it's that bad. She is saying things all of the time to us, for sure. So yes, family saying, well, you're the expert, right? That's why you're here. So I hear that a lot. That's why you're here. Well, what would you recommend? What do you think we should be doing? Or what resources do you have for me? So they're very much looking to you to provide them with the information sometimes, rather than them providing you with the information. And that's right, Lisa. It makes it challenging sometimes to ask the right type of questions that help yield the types of responses that we're looking for. So a big piece of what we have to do at the intake sometimes in these more challenging situations is to shift this perspective sometimes that families have of us at the center. So we have to reframe early intervention from therapy and early interventionalists being at the center of this whole process, and show them that it's actually them and their family that's at the center of this process, and that we're going to be looking to them for answers rather than just them looking to us for the answers to the questions that they have. And that can be really hard for families, and it can be really hard for us asking the questions to remember that that's really our ultimate goal in early intervention. So before we dig into eco maps and how they apply to early intervention and how can we use them as tools, we are going to have an exercise in empathy first. So I would love if all of you would take out a sheet of paper, flip over something you're writing on now, use a napkin if you're in the middle of lunch. If you have a Word document up to take notes, you could even jot down a list of things there. But I would love if you guys would take a minute and make your own eco map. So let's pretend for a second that I'm your service coordinator and this is your intake, and I'm asking you that question that our families get asked all the time in our practice. And that is, tell me about the resources you have that help to support you. So just jot it down on your paper or in your Word document or whatever you're writing on, and tell me about the resources you have that help to support you. So just take a few seconds and think about it and just jot it down. I'll stop talking so you can think a little bit more clearly. All right, and then as you're kind of wrapping up, I know I didn't give you a lot of time. Anything that you're comfortable writing in chat, could you take a second to write in chat, what are some things that you wrote down? So from your eco map, when I ask you that question, tell me about the resources you have that support you. What are some things that you wrote down for yourself? Great, Corey. So you wrote down your immediate family. So this is definitely a resource that is supportive to you, is your family. What else do we have? Excellent, Bitsy. So you are echoing Corey's kind of comment about family, but you added your neighbors, your friends. Excellent. I know A Mark 1 is not your name, but employment, that is an incredible resource that a lot of people don't think about. Our employment is certainly necessary for supporting us in our daily routines and our daily habits. Give you guys another couple seconds. What else are we writing down? Lauren, your calendar and your phone, for sure. It's funny to think of our phone as being a support system, but we keep so many things on our phones that are really integral to the things that we have to do, right? Great, Debbie. So your sister and your aunt, so your family, your friends, church, work, volunteer activities. So Debbie, you're staying busy, absolutely. So what you'll notice, and if you are still kind of typing, feel free to keep putting that in chat because we're going to use this information as we keep going. But we noticed that a lot of these things kind of overlap. A lot of you are saying family, your friends, your jobs. So we do share a lot of the same resources, absolutely. So when I was preparing for this presentation, I decided that I was going to use a conversation with the family to share with you guys. So you could see it kind of in process. And I spoke with the Miller family and I asked them this same question at intake. Tell me about the resources that you have to support you. And this mom responded with some of the same things that you guys said, right? So she thought of her peers. And then she also said that for her family, some resources that are really continuous for them are their son's therapist, which is an occupational and a speech therapist. She also said that she is a great resource for herself, which was incredible to hear a parent have that confidence to say, myself, I'm a resource, because she came with some professional knowledge, but she said she also spends a lot of time researching. So if she has questions or she needs things, she spends a lot of her personal time kind of preparing and educating herself on those things. And she actually also mentioned her Aetna insurance, which I noticed we didn't have in the chat here, but she said her Aetna insurance is a huge resource for her because, and this is kind of a plug for some of you who might be looking for resources for families, Aetna actually has a special department for autism spectrum disorder. So her son has been diagnosed with ASD, and so she finds it extremely helpful to go to that specialized department with her insurance to get further resources on the stuff that she needed. But as I pointed out, there are some things that you guys wrote that Mrs. Miller really didn't respond with right away. And so I asked some follow-up questions, right? Well, what about family? What about your neighbor and your community? And she responded to me and she said, well, you didn't ask me that question, right? Instead, you asked me, tell me about the resources you have to support you. So this was challenging, going back to Lisa's comment, because she had said, you know, it's asking the right questions. That's a big challenge for me, is determining what question can I ask that's going to yield the most rich information and valuable information for this family. So I want to circle back to kind of how I proposed this, which is an exercise in empathy. In the chat, can you tell me what was challenging about this exercise for you? So when I asked you, tell me about the resources that you have that help you, that support you, what was challenging for you as you sat down and tried to write out this eco map for your own life? go ahead and write it in the chat. What do you feel like was challenging for you? Right, Lisa, thinking about all of them. How am I going to choose what to write? You gave me 5 seconds to answer this question, and all I could really get to is my family, friends, and work. Excellent. So am I supposed to be doing my formal resources or my informal resources? Bitsy, for sure. It's very subjective. And that kind of gets back to even what Mark 1 was saying is, what are you looking for, right? If you're asking for formal things, then I'm going to choose these things. But if you're asking for informal, I might be able to give you a lot more information. And Debbie, this is such a good point. I'm so glad that you said it, is sharing personal information. Even though I'm here and we're over Zoom today and you guys are all out in your individual spaces, I had wondered if it might have felt a little bit invasive for me to ask you, hey, tell me about your resources. Tell me about your support system. So Debbie, when you're talking about empathy, that's an excellent point. Is imagine someone being in your home and looking at you and waiting for this response and saying, give me some of this really personal information for your life. Absolutely. So these are really important things to remember as we go through this process with families, right? Is to have that empathy. And as you guys pointed out, let's make this as clear for families as possible. Like I told you, when I asked this mother this question, her response was, you didn't ask me that. And she followed up with, you asked me about my resources. So I assumed you meant my resources for Silas, who was her son, and for autism spectrum disorder specifically, right? So then I asked myself, okay, what should I be asking instead, right? I thought that's what I was asking her, but my phrasing really wasn't completely clear. I wasn't telling her formal and informal. I wasn't giving her guidance in any direction, and I was asking her to share personal information very quickly. So the other thing that I forgot is who I was, right? So I'm an early intervention provider. So when I go into the home and I ask questions, parents and caregivers are making immediate associations between me and their child's delays or diagnosis. And so when I ask a question, their bias is already guiding them toward those types of responses. But when we're looking at family systems theory and ecological systems, what we want the family to be focused on is their whole family and all of the things that surround them, not just those things that relate to this child and their specific need. So we want to reframe again and highlight the system. So instead, I was thinking I could ask, what or who provides you with the most help throughout your days, right? So then we are making it bigger. We're including those informal and formal resources. And hopefully, Lisa and Corey, we're getting a little bit more clear about which resources should I be thinking of, right? Because it can be hard to think of everything all at once. And so if we can narrow it down a little bit more to say, who provides you with the most help throughout your days? That can help give a little bit more guidance as to what we're looking for. This may or may not be applicable to you, but another question that I thought would be helpful is, what or who helped you throughout your early intervention journey? So how did you end up here? Who are you engaging with currently in early intervention that can be helpful? So if we think more about this question of what or who provides you with the most help throughout your days, take a second to look at your eco map that you've already written out and consider what other things might you add. So I'm going to give you another few seconds where I won't talk. What things would you add to your eco map? Right, I agree, Corey. When we're not just saying resources specifically, it does help it to be a little bit more easily understood what we mean, for sure. It's using more of that conversational language. So again, you're just jotting down on your ego map. If you think about getting through your day from your alarm clock beeping in the morning until you head to bed at night, what or who is helping you through that? Great, Lisa. Thank you for sharing. Your husband, your mother, your neighbor, baseball moms. Bitsy, I know that life. My daycare, absolutely. I would not be able to get through my days without the daycare providers. Absolutely. So Corey, you added too with this church family. You have two very close friends who might be more impactful in your daily life than when I just asked you about general resources. Did anybody else add anything to their eco map? Anybody else want to share in the chat? Great, Donna. Coworkers, service providers, great. And Donna, I love that that contribution of children, because I was talking about this with someone, and it's funny when you realize that your children actually are helpful. Sometimes you think of being their caretaker, but even for families to help them see, oh, you actually have older kids who can help you with this, or even your little kids provide you with kind of emotional support and make you happy throughout your days. So that's a great inclusion. All right, fantastic responses, you guys. Thank you for being comfortable enough to share those things with me today. So when I asked Mrs. Miller those more specific questions, right, to tell me about your day, when I got back to the office, this is what I was able to draw up. So Seth makes these really beautiful creations for our talk on Tuesday with beautiful pictures. And so I wanted to include this, even though it is definitely not as visually appealing to show you that in your practice, this can look like a list. And it can look like this. You can see I ended up making little errors that I wanted to draw it up and make it really pretty for you guys, but I decided I'm just going to leave them here so that you guys can see that this is meant to be a quick jotting things down as you go, right? So here, Mrs. Miller was able to add, right? Oh, well, if I think about my day, our grandparent, the child's grandparents are very helpful, right? Both maternal and paternal grandparents help to watch the kids so I can do different things. She added other families with a child with autism spectrum disorder. Then what I went ahead and did, you'll notice on this eco map, is I separated occupational therapist from speech therapist. So even though the mom kind of initially said to me, oh, Silas is therapist, I broke them apart because we know she might have very different relationships with each of those therapists. Some of you guys know in your early intervention practice, a child can be seeing 2 or 3 therapists, and the parent might have very different relationships with each of them. Mrs. Miller added her developmental pediatrician and her regular pediatrician, right? Those are people who helped guide her toward early intervention in the first place and kind of made those referrals. And just like Bitsy with daycare, this mom was like, oh, school, right? The school that he goes to, the preschool that he goes to is so helpful for getting me through my day, and they're really supportive of my family and Silas's needs. So now we can see that we can create this much more well-rounded picture if we just kind of reframe those questions and put the family at the center. So now that we see what we're working with here, what an eco map looks like, and this is kind of what we had gotten into in May, we want to dig a little bit deeper into family systems theory, right? We want to think, going back to Naomi's discussion, how does this tie in with considering the relationships and the push and pull around a family every day? So we noticed in the chat here, and then even as we compared the chat reflections to Mrs. Miller's reflections, that we see a lot of overlap. If you ask hundreds of people, tell me about your resources, what helps you through your day? A lot of people are going to mention a lot of the same things, right? Family, friends, pediatricians, schools. What differentiates these things for us, of course, is the type of relationship that exists between those things and the person that you're asking. So even though our support systems might mimic each other generally, they are so different and so intricate. And so eco maps in this visual are a great way to get at this. And so McBride and Brotherson, and their article is in the resources that Seth is going to share with you at the end of all of this. They shared some examples of how we can visualize these types of relationships so we can help individualize our eco maps to every family. So when we draw these lines, as you see in front of you in the eco map that you made for yourself, we might draw arrows on that line to designate this is an element in my life that I get a lot of good resources from and that share resources with me. For Mrs. Miller, that Aetna insurance with the autism spectrum disorder department, right? Huge resources. I'm going to draw arrows to show that relationship. We can also show strong relationships by doing a double line, right? So Corey, going back to your inclusion of church, right? Your church family, you might say that that's a very strong relationship and a very strong element of your life and a very strong support for you. Unfortunately, our family system and our ecological system isn't always full of resources and strengths. So we can also depict weaker relationships, right? So maybe I see my child's pediatrician, but I don't really feel like I get a lot of information from them. So we've been seeing them for all of our well baby visits. And I feel like when I ask questions, I don't really get very much, and I can't really view that pediatrician as a resource. So we can demonstrate that relationship by drawing dashed lines, right? So that we can visually see that this is a weak relationship. And then we can also really show and visualize stressful relationships by doing these hatched lines. So maybe you wrote your children, right? So going back to Donna, that wonderful inclusion of your children, but maybe that is a very stressful part of your day. So you might want to do hatched lines so you can visually see that this can be a really stressful relationship. And once we have our eco map and we can draw our lines and we can say, oh, these are resources, these are strong relationships, these are weak ones, we can reflect maybe on some of the things that we need. So take a second on your own eco map and see if you can't add some of these elements to your own eco map, considering the things that you chose to include, your coworkers, your daycare, your partners. Can you visualize those relationships with one of these lines here? And I'll give you a second. So now that you've done that, take a look at your map and kind of ask yourself, if I'm looking at myself at the center, am I viewing my network as very strong? Is there a lot of stress that's surrounding me? Do I have a lot of resources that are available to me? And these are excellent questions that you can ask yourself when you consider your system as a whole. And it's a very important reflective practice for the families that you work with too, to be able to look at their eco map and realize I have a lot of really strong relationships that support me on a regular basis, or there is a lot of stress surrounding me. What might I need to help with this kind of stressful system that I'm existing in the middle of? Or where might I access more resources? I really don't feel like I have a lot of resources right now. So it's a great reflective practice to consider not only how we can visualize these relationships, but then why are they important, right? Why are those relationships important? Right. Excellent, Corey. It's interesting to think that some stressful relationships are still very necessary, right? Absolutely. So I have this doctor and it's a very stressful for me to go because it's a very odd bedside manner and I never know how things are going to look, but I still really need that doctor. And he does provide me with a lot of resources while I'm there. That's an excellent point, Corey. So let's think about, yeah, Lauren's feeling the same way. So the complexity of these relationships, you might find that sometimes it's a double line and a hatched line, or maybe it's an arrow line and a hatched line. And that's okay, because relationships are complex. They don't always fit into one single definition, even though that would certainly make our lives easier some days. So let's think back to Cassie. So we did some of this grounding work. We did an exercise in empathy and kind of reflected on how this might feel for families. So let's think about Cassie again. So I asked you guys if you would please take out that handout from last month about Cassie's vignette. We know that she goes to church. We know that she goes to daycare where she has a few teachers and peers. She lives with her mom, dad, and her brother. And she has these relationships with her maternal and paternal grandparents. So considering this key that we talked about with our arrows for resources, double lines, dashed lines, and hatched lines, in the chat, can you guys write for me, what might we do between or for the line between Cassie and her grandparents? So let's think of both of them, because we got a lot of information about both of them back in May, and kind of recap that. She has a set of maternal grandparents and paternal grandparents who are a part of their lives. In the chat, can you guys write, what might you do with the lines between those grandparents? Right, Lauren. So we know that mom said her relationship with her parents is stressful or weak, right? That it's not a strong relationship. There is definitely some tumultuous stuff happening there. Absolutely. So as Lauren pointed out, between our line with one set of grandparents, we might make that dashed. Absolutely. Or hatched, depending on that conversation with mom. What about with the paternal grandparents? What about dad's parents who live further away? Excellent, Corey. So they say we have a strong relationship with them. We make it a point to talk with them every week. It's a big resource for the kids. We build it into our very busy routine. So if we were to take this eco map that maybe we drew at our initial intake, right, when we learned about some routines and we learned about some resources and support from mom, then when we get into our car after that visit, we might add these lines, right? So we might say, ooh, I know that mom said grandparents are involved, but I learned this is stressful. This one is a little bit more stressful, and this is a stronger one that they can lean on for support. So this is how our eco map becomes kind of malleable, right? So we can add these relationship types as we go along, and they might change, right? What starts as strong when you first meet a family might become stressful over time, and that's okay, because we are just working toward visually representing those things that we learn along the way. So if we keep working with Cassie and say we are coming up on our 6-month review, we call mom and she gives us even more great information about what has been going on with Cassie and her family. Okay, so we're gonna get more information with the next few slides. So let's listen to what's been going on with Cassie and her family. So Cassie is continuing to attend the daycare she was in the last time we saw her, but she's also transitioned to a center-based program. So in addition to kind of that initial daycare setting, she is now in a larger classroom setting for part of the day with 15 children and 2 teachers. So during her day, she is playing outside, she's reading books, and she's doing art projects. So they've got a lot of varied activities. Cassie has developed friendships with peers in her class, and she's regularly seeking out play opportunities. She is using more words and is verbally communicating her wants and needs. So this is just really great progress from the last time that we saw her. She's acquired a lot of skills in lots of different areas of development, right? She however, has developed challenges in this time with gaining weight, and unfortunately, she did drop off her growth chart. So Cassie was evaluated by a gastroenterologist and an endocrinologist, and what kind of came out of that is that she is going to be followed by a nutritionist, and her family is actively working on adding calories to her meals whenever they can. So Cassie's become really reluctant to try new foods during this process, and she'll participate very socially in meals at home and in daycare, but it's the actual food aspect that's causing her some hesitation. So mom and dad are saying meal times can be really stressful now because they have very different ideas about and approaches to eating, and you guys, I'm sure, have heard this before. She is continuing to be followed by her cardiologist, and 6 months ago, she did have a surgical procedure to close a hole in her heart. The doctor and the medical visits have become very challenging because Cassie gets really upset and she does not want to participate in these appointments. So Cassie's energy has increased after the surgery, but she is going to continue to be monitored every 6 months for the foreseeable future. The other addition that mom shared is that the family has decided to no longer have contact with the maternal grandparents, and mom sought out and is now going to therapy to help support her as she is processing through this changing family dynamic, right? So that's a huge shift for mom to cut off contact with her parents. So with this new information in the chat, can you guys please write, what are some elements you might add to Cassie's eco map? Since you saw her last with this new information, what are some new things that you might add to that family's eco map? If you could just type them in the chat. Right, Naomi, the cardiologist, right? So we have this continuing relationship with the cardiologist, but we know that it's become stressful. So we might add the cardiologist, and just like with mom's parents, do that hatched line. Absolutely. Corey, great. So remember, we're looking not just at Cassie in the center, but her whole family. And so if we consider the whole family, that's right, Corey, we would want to include mom's therapist. This is definitely a support and a resource for the family. And we do have a change with mom's parents. Maybe now Naomi would want to depict this visually by taking that line away from the maternal grandparents altogether, right? Or maybe changing it to a weak relationship because they've cut them out. It's maybe not causing them as much daily stress, right? So depending on the family's reflection, we would definitely alter that. We could also add the nutritionist, right? The endocrinologist. We would want to add the school and this newfound relationship that Cassie has with her peers and how socially interested she is taken to this new environment for sure. These concerns that mom had initially with these new additions to their eco map, she certainly has made an awful lot of progress, right? So this peer group has been huge. The school, we have more medical providers involved now than we did the last time that we saw the family. And so every time we see this family, we will see this network around them grow, or some things might be taken away. And certainly we would continue to develop these lines to better visualize the understanding that we have of how these families are engaging with the things around them. So we've talked about kind of how this would apply to ourselves, how we can kind of put that into practice with Cassie, but we said that we would follow up with, how can you use this as a tool, right? I think I specifically said, I know that you're stressed, there's a lot going on. So how can this integrate into your work rather than being an extra step off to the side? So we are going to talk about 5 ways that you can take this to work with you. We're going to look at individualization, ongoing assessment, organization, resource building, and empowerment. So first, we hope that your big takeaway from today is just how incredibly this allows us to individualize. So when we are eco mapping, we're really looking at family intricacies. So going back to the fact that we share a lot of the same resources, but we engage with those resources very differently. So it helps us to better serve families during provider sessions, as service coordinators, and during transition, if we can see this family system and ecological system that's surrounding them. During ongoing assessment, we can better prepare for annuals and other ongoing assessment needs because we have a really rich source of information that we can look to. We can just glance at it visually and know that we need to ask about how things are going with different locations, with different people in their lives, maybe with the different medical specialists, so that we can be sure we are thinking about all areas of development and all areas of this family life when we're considering our ongoing assessment and practice. Maybe the most pertinent way that you guys can use this for work is this organization with high caseloads. So we know everybody's caseloads across the state really are climbing right now. So I envision, and how I use the eco map is, as I'm working with the family, I keep it almost paper clipped right in that child's chart, so that I can look at it very quickly and I can get a quick grasp of the major points that I need to know about this family. And it's quick and it's very easily accessible, right? So keeping that really detailed information can help us pull that eco map from our last provider session, maybe. So if I'm a developmental service provider and I see this child 2 times a month and I'm kind of updating it as I go, before I pop into Cassie's house, I can pull that out and say, oh yeah, she started at a new daycare. I definitely want to ask about how that's going. Or mom had mentioned she made this really good friend in class that they're going to set up a play group with. I wonder if that's been going well or if it's been stressful having her around that peer. So it's a great way to organize and keep track of all of our babies in a very personal way, despite the potential for our high caseloads. Another way that we can use this in our practice is through resource building. So I encouraged you guys to look at your own eco map and ask yourselves, do I have any arrows drawn? Do I have a lot of arrows drawn? So for families, they might look at this and say, I need more resources for nutrition, right? So Cassie is seeing a nutritionist now, but really I only see that nutritionist once every 3 or 4 months. I feel like I need more resources on nutrition in the meantime that I could implement in my house. Also, as providers and service coordinators, we could look at that family's eco map and we could see they don't really have a lot of resources in this area of their life. So maybe when I'm doing my allowable activity or I'm making my direct contact, I want to make sure that the resources I'm offering them are going to be valuable for them, right? That they don't have a lot of resources in that area right now. Likewise, if they have a ton of resources in another area, maybe I'll shy away from those things and provide them on that more sparse side of things. And perhaps the most important way that we can use eco maps is by using them as a tool to empower families. So our goal in early intervention is to give families the tools to help themselves long after we are gone. So we want to prepare them to find their own resources and reflect on their own process and their own families in a way that's going to give them the skill set that they need to continue these healthy best practices when their service coordinator or their occupational therapist or whoever it is no longer in the home following up on these things for them. So what I find is sometimes the best thing that you can do with an eco map after you draw it and flesh it out is turn it around and hand it right back to that parent and say, look at all of these resources that you have. Look at this support system that you have built over time, right? Throughout your time in early intervention, you've reached out to these specialists, or you've had these therapists, you have started going to play groups, or you sought out a support group, right, on Facebook with other moms with children that were premature, right? So these are the places that you can go to continue to find resources and continue to empower yourself after we're here. And that visual reminder is sometimes so important when life and chaos kind of inhibits our ability to see things clearly. Sometimes just putting that eco map up on the fridge with a magnet so that parents can walk past it and look and see, here's what I have available to me. That might be the best way that we can really take this to work with us. So today, you are going to get another copy of the resources document. It will include the resources from our part 1 talk on Tuesday with Naomi. And it will include a couple of new resources today. So one of them will be that McBride and Brotherson article that I referred to, and the other will be kind of an EcoMap template for those of you that feel like you would benefit from something of that nature. So it's a template and it has a nice key for you with the lines included. And Seth went ahead and dropped that in the chat too, if you'd rather just kind of click on that link that he included. So Corey, I will turn it over to you.
Jessica, thank you so much for sharing all this information. I do want to put a little plug in. Right before we started, Jessica and Naomi were reminding me too that they are presenting at Creating Connections to Shining Stars, which is July 19 through 21. So if you're planning to attend and want more information about all of this, they're going to be there. They're going to be the stars of the show. So thank you, Jessica, for jumping in. Naomi, I wanted to give you an opportunity to see if there was anything you wanted to add before we wrap up for the day. Naomi may have had to step away for a minute. That's
Sorry, y'all, we're experiencing some weather up here in Northern Virginia. In my area, as soon as there's weather, I pretty much get kicked off the internet. So I'm on my phone right now, but I just wanted to say thank y'all for coming so much. And I think that this is just so important when we're thinking about family relationships and how we build those relationships and using this tool to be able to do so.
I agree. Such an easy tool, and I love the idea of being able to hang it on the refrigerator. I think that's a very cool idea. So I want to thank everybody for participating. As a reminder, check your inbox as soon as we're finished. You should already probably have an email to take the survey about the Talks on Tuesday today. Once you've completed that survey, you can download your certificate of participation for 1 hour of professional development. I also want to remind everybody that Talks on Tuesday takes a break during the summer. So all of y'all can be at the beach and you aren't going to be missing a Talks on Tuesday. And we will be looking at the fall for some more professional development opportunities. So thank you again for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of the day and we will see you soon. Thanks, everybody.